Welcome everyone! Today I have another exciting tale to share with you all. It's the tale of Ragnar Lodbrok.
Yeah, but Hipstorian, we've already heard Ragnar's story so many times. There are literally 100 videos about him on YouTube.
You know what? Fine, have it your way. You want original? I'll give you original. You won't get any more original than what I have here, for my name isn't Hipstorian. See what you think of the original manuscript. Now then. Her rytter het Jarl Rika og han heter Ajolandi. Hen var kvanjader. Dotter hans het Thjora. Hun var allra kvenna fritest sintum, og kurtesust at serum atla.
Hipstorian, don't make us turn on the subtitles. You know we hate reading.
Ugh, tough audience. Fine, we'll do the translated version of Ragnar Saga Lodbrokar, otherwise known as the Saga of Ragnar Lodbrok and his sons. There was an earl called Heroth, who was mighty and famous in Gautland. He was married. His daughter was called Thora. She was the most beautiful of all women in appearance, and was most courteous in all things which were better to have than not to have. It was her nickname that she was called Borherhjört, since she stood out from all women in beauty as the hart does from all other animals. The earl loved his daughter very much. He had a bower made for her a short ways from the king's hall, and about the bower was a wooden fence. The earl made it his custom to send his daughter something every day for her amusement, and he said that he would go on with this custom. This is said about that he had his daughter send a little heather snake one day, which was excessively beautiful. The snake seemed good to her. She kept it in an ashen box and placed gold under it. It came about that the snake did not have room in the ashen box, and then lay outside it in a ring about the box. And it afterwards came about that it did not have room in the bower, and the gold grew beneath it precisely as the snake itself did. Then it lay outside around the bower, so that its head and tail could touch together, and it became hard to deal with. No man dared to come to the bower on account of this snake save one, who brought it food, and had eaten an ox as its meal. To the earl, this seemed a great harm, and he spoke this vow, that he would give his daughter to that man, whoever he might be, who killed the snake, and that gold which was under him would be her dowry. These tidings became known throughout the land, but nevertheless, no one trusted himself to overpower the great snake. At that time, Sigurd Ring had power over Denmark. He was a powerful king, and was famous from that one war, when he battled Harald Hilditun at Pravalla, and Harald fell before him, as has become known throughout all of the northern regions. Sigurd had one son, who was called Ragnar. He was a large man, fair in appearance and with good intelligence, generous with his men, but stern with his foes. Soon after he had come of age, he got himself troops and warships, and he became one of the greatest warriors, so that hardly anyone was his match. He heard what Earl Heroth had spoken, but he gave it no heed and led on as if he did not know about it. He had made for himself garments in a wondrous fashion. They were shaggy breeches and a fur coat, and when they were done, he had them boiled in pitch. Afterwards, he stored them away. One summer, he took his war host to Gautland, and he anchored his ships in a hidden creek, which was a short distance from where the earl ruled. And when Ragnar had been there one night, he woke early in the morning, rose up, and took the same armor which was mentioned before, put on the armor, and took a great spear in his hand and went off the ship alone. And there where the sand was, he rolled in the sand. And before he went on his way, he took the nail holding the spearhead to the shaft out of his spear, and then went from the ship to the earl's gate and came there early in the day, so that when he came, all the men were still asleep. Then he turned towards the bower, and when he came to the wooden fence where the snake was, he attacked it with his spear. He thrust the spear at it, and then pulled it back to himself, and then he attacked again. That thrust struck the snake's spine, and when he twisted the spear so that the spearhead came off the shaft, there was such a great din at the snake's death throes that all the bower shook. And then Ragnar turned away. Then a jet of blood came and struck him between his shoulders, but that did not harm him, since his clothes that he had made protected him. And those who were in the bower woke with the din and went out of the bower. Then Thora saw a great man going from the bower and asked him his name and whom he wanted to find. He stopped and spoke. "I have risked my famous life, beautiful woman, 15 years old, and I vanquished the earthfish. Near misfortune, a swift death for me, save I have pierced well to the heart, the ringed salmon of the heath." And then he went on his way and did not speak more with her, and the spear had stood in the wound afterwards, but he had the shaft with him. When she had heard this verse, she understood what he had said to her about his errand, and thus how old he was. And then she wondered to herself who he might be, and she thought that she did not know whether she was a human being or not, since it seemed to her that his growth was as large as it said about monsters at the age that he was. Then she turned into the bower and went to sleep, and when men came out in the morning, they became aware that the snake was dead, and it was stabbed with a large spear, and the spearhead stood fast in the wound. Then the earl had the spearhead removed, and it was so large that few could have used it as a weapon. Then the earl considered what he had said about that man who had killed the snake, and he thought he didn't know whether a human being had done this or not, and he then discussed with his friends and daughter how he should search after him. It seemed likely that that man who had won it would afterwards seek to have the reward. She advised him to have a large thing summoned, and command those who do not want to have the earl's anger, and are in any way able to attend the thing to come here. If any is the man who gave the snake its death wound, he shall then have the spear shaft which goes with the spearhead. That seemed promising to the earl, and he then had a thing called. But when the day came, when the thing was to take place, the earl came and many other chieftains. Many men came. It became known at Ragnar's ship that there was a thing to be held shortly. Then Ragnar went from his ship with nearly all his men to the thing, but when they came there, they stood somewhat away from other men, since Ragnar saw that many more men had come than was customary. Then the earl stood up and asked for their silence and spoke. First he asked those men who had responded well to his summons to accept his thanks. Then he spoke of what had occurred. Then he spoke about what he had sworn regarding the man who had killed the snake. Then afterwards he said, "The snake is now dead, and the man who did this famous deed left the spear standing in the wound. And if anyone who came here to the thing is he who has the shaft which held the spearhead and which was borne away, and may thus prove his claim, then I shall fulfill that which I have sworn, whoever he is, of either great or lowly rank." And when he ended his speech, he had the spearhead brought before each man who was at the thing, and commanded him who had claimed the deed, or who had the spear shaft which fitted the spearhead, to speak. It was so done. None was found to be the one who had the shaft. When the spearhead came to where Ragnar was and was shown to him, then he acknowledged that it was his. Each fitted the other, the spear and the shaft. The men then thought that they knew that he must have killed the snake, and he became very famous in all the northern lands on account of this deed. And he then asked for Thora, the earl's daughter, and the earl received this offer gladly. Then she was given to him, and it happened that they had the largest feast with the best provisions in the kingdom. At this feast, Ragnar was married, and when the feast was over, Ragnar went to his kingdom and ruled over it and loved Thora greatly. They had 2 sons. The elder was called Eirik, and the younger was called Agnar. They grew large and were handsome in appearance. They were very strong and were taller than the other men who were around. They knew all the kinds of literature. It happened one time that Thora fell ill, and she died from this illness. To Ragnar, this seemed so grave that he would not rule his kingdom, and gave other men the ruling of his lands along with his sons. and then he took to performing the same deeds as he had before. He set out on a raiding expedition, and wherever he went, he gained victory. It was during the summer that he turned his ships to Norway, because he had many kinsmen and friends there and wanted to visit them. He came in his ships during the evening into a little harbor. There was a farm a short distance from there which was called Spangarhead, and they lay there in the harbor that night. And when morning came, the cooks went to land to bake bread. They saw that the farm was not far off, and it seemed to them that it would suit them better to go to the house and be there and do their work there. And when they came to this little farm, they found someone to speak to. It was a poor woman, and they asked whether she was a housewife and what she was called. She said that she was a housewife. "And you will not like my name. I am called Grima, but who are you?" They said that they were the liegemen of Ragnar Lodbrok, and they wanted to carry out their work. "And we want that you work with us." The poor woman answered that her hands were very stiff. "But in the past I have been able to do my work very well. But I have myself a daughter, who can work with you and who will come home soon and is called Kraka. But it has now come about that I scarcely have control over her." And Kraka had gone out with the animals in the morning and had seen that many ships had come to land. And then she went and washed herself. But the poor woman had forbidden her to do that, because she did not want men to see her beauty, because she was the most beautiful of all women, and her hair was so long that it went down to the ground, and as beautiful as the most beautiful silk. And then Kraka came home. The cooks had started a fire, and Kraka saw that men had come there, whom she had not seen before. She looked at them, and they at her. And then they asked Grima, "Is this your daughter we see, this beautiful maiden?" "It is not a lie," said Grima. "That is my daughter you see." "You two must be very unlike," they said, "since you were so monstrous. We have not seen a girl as beautiful, and we see that she in no way has your looks, because you are most hideous." Grima said, "You can't notice it in me now. My appearance is now changed from how it was." They then agreed that she would work with them. She asked, "What shall I do?" They said they wanted her to roll out the bread, and they would afterwards bake it. And she then went to work, and she worked well. But they all kept looking at her constantly, so they did not mind their work, and the bread was burned. And when they had finished their work, they went back to the ships. And there, when they brought out the meal, everyone said that they had never been given anything so terrible, and the cooks deserved to be punished for it. Then Ragnar asked why they had done the cooking thus. They said that they had seen a woman so beautiful that they did not mind their work, and they thought that there was not a more beautiful woman in the entire world. And when they had said so much of her beauty, then Ragnar spoke and said that he thought that there could not be one equal to the beauty which Thora had possessed. They said she was no uglier. Then Ragnar spoke. "Now I must send men there, who know how to look well. If it is thus as you have said, then your heedlessness will be forgiven of you. But if the woman is in any way uglier than you said, then you shall take a great punishment upon yourselves." And then he sent his men to find this beautiful maiden. But the headwind was so strong that they could not leave that day, and Ragnar spoke with his messengers. "If this young maiden seems to you as beautiful as has been told, tell her to come to meet with me, as I want to speak to her. I want her to be mine. I want her to be neither dressed nor undressed, neither fed nor unfed. And moreover, she must not be all alone, but nevertheless no man may accompany her." In the early morning, Kraka told the man that she would go to meet with Ragnar. "But I want to alter my dress somewhat. You have a trout net, and I want to wrap that around me, and I shall let my hair hang down over it, and I will thus be bare in no place. And I will taste of one leek, that is little food, but it will be known that I have eaten. And I will have your dog accompany me. I will thus not go all alone, even though no man accompanies me." And when the poor woman heard of her plan, she thought that she had great cunning. And when Kraka had made herself ready, she went on her way until she came to the ship, and she was fair to see, as her hair was bright and looked like gold. And then Ragnar called to her and asked who she was and whom she wanted to find. She answered and spoke this verse. I have not dared to violate your bidding, Ragnar, when you bade me to come to your meeting, nor have I broken the king's order. No man is with myself. My flesh is not clearly revealed. I have quite fully a following, but I have come all alone. Ragnar set her on the deck near himself and spoke with her, and she answered him well, and he was pleased and happy with her. He spoke this verse. If the precious lady was merciful to the ward of the fatherland, she might take me to stay in her arms. Then he said that he liked her well, and that he thought for certain that she should come with him. That same evening, he sent men to find her and speak Ragnar's words, that she then prepared to depart for good. They travelled well. Ragnar then came home to his land, and a glorious feast was prepared for his return. Then there was joyful drinking for both his return and his wedding. And the first evening, when they came to one bed, Ragnar wished to consummate their marriage, but she asked to avoid that, because she said that some evil might afterwards be born out of it if her advice was ignored. Ragnar said that could not be true. He asked how long it should be so. Then she said, 3 nights shall thus pass, apart in the evening, although settled together in one hall, before our sacrifice to the holy gods. Thus shall this denial prevent a lasting harm to my son. He whom you are hasty to beget will have no bones. And although she said that, Ragnar gave it no heed, and followed his own advice. A little while passed, and their marriage was good and full of love. Then Kraka knew herself to be pregnant, and it progressed until she gave birth to a boy child, and the boy was sprinkled with water and given a name and called Ivar. The boy was boneless, and there was cartilage where his bone should have been, but when he was young, he grew so strong that none was his match. He was of all men most handsome in appearance, and so wise that none was known who was a wiser counselor than he. It happened that more children were granted them. Another son they called Björn, the third Pitzerk, the fourth Rognvald. They were all great men, very valiant, and as soon as they could learn them, they became well versed in all the Íþróttir, and wherever they went, Ivar had himself borne on staves, as he could not walk, and he had advice for them in whatever they did. Eirik and Agnar, Ragnar's sons, were such great men themselves that their like could hardly be found, and they went in their warships every summer, and were renowned for their harrying. When Ragnar and Kraka came into the same bed, she said, Now I shall tell you that I am the daughter of a king, and not of a poor man, and my father was such a great man that none have proved themselves his equal, and my mother was the most beautiful of all women and the wisest. Her name shall be lifted up as long as the world is standing. Then he asked who her father was, if she was not the daughter of a poor man who was living at Spangarhed. She said that she was the daughter of Sigurd Fafnisbana and Brynhild Butladóttir. And when Brynhild was delivered, a name was given me, and I was called Aslaug. You know that I am with child. It will be a male child that I have, and this mark will be on the boy, that it will seem like a snake lies within the boy's eyes. Then it came to the time when she knew herself to be in labor, and she delivered a boy child. Thus the young man was born unto the hall and laid into the lap of Ragnar's cloak. When he saw the boy, he was asked what he should be called. He spoke a verse. Sigurd will the boy be called. He will thus conduct himself in battle, much like the father of his mother, after whom he is called. Thus will the greatest of Odin's race be named, the snake-eyed one, and he will bring much death. Now the story tells us that Ragnar was sitting at home in his kingdom, and he did not know where his sons were. But he heard tales from all his men that said that none might be equal to his sons, and it seemed to him that none were as famous as they. Then he wondered how he might gain fame that would not be any less long-lived. Then he thought about this to himself, and then he sent for his craftsmen and had them fell wood for 2 large ships. And men heard that these 2 merchant vessels were so large that such ships had never been made in the Northlands. Then he gathered from all his kingdoms a large mass of arms, and from these actions, men discerned that he had decided on some war expedition away from his land. This became known across all of the lands that were nearby, and then all the men and the kings who ruled those lands feared that they might not be able to remain in their lands, and they all had watches set up across their lands in case he might attack them. One day Aslog asked Ragnar where he was intending on journeying. He told her that he intended to go to England with no more ships than 2 merchant vessels, and as many troops as they might ferry. Then Aslog said, "This journey which you are planning seems very imprudent to me. I have a mind to advise you to have more boats and smaller ones. There is no glory," he said, "if men conquer a land with many ships. But there is no tale of any that have conquered such a land as England with 2 ships." Then Ragnar spoke this verse: "No bold man may spare the amber of the Rhine if he desires warriors, but many rings help a wise chieftain, worse than warrior men. It is bad to defend the town gates with brand-red rings. I know very many dead boars, whose treasures live on." Then Ragnar held course in his ships to England, as he had planned. He received a bitter wind, so that he broke both his merchant vessels against England. But all his troops came to land and they kept their clothes and weapons. And there, whenever he came to farms and towns and castles, he conquered them. And there was a king called Ella, who then ruled England. He had heard reports when Ragnar had left his own land. Ella had sent forth men, so that he might know as soon as Ragnar came to land. Then these men journeyed to meet with King Ella, and told him war tidings. Then he had a summons sent throughout all his land and commanded every man come to him who could wield a shield and ride a horse and dared to fight. He gathered so many together there that it was a wondrous thing. Then King Ella and his men prepared for battle. Then King Ella spoke with his troops. "If we gain victory in this battle, and it happens that you know that it is Ragnar who has come against us, then you shall not bear weapons against him, because he has sons who would never again leave us be, if he fell." At the same time, Ragnar prepared for battle, and when they met, the battle began. Ragnar had many fewer troops. The battle had not been going long before most of Ragnar's troops fell. But wherever he went that day, the army cleared a way before him. He struck at their shields or mails or helm, and so great were his hewings that none could stand before them. It happened with all who shot or hewed at him that not one weapon did him any harm, and he never received a wound, but he killed a great multitude of King Ella's troops. However, the battle ended so that all of King Ragnar's troops fell, and he was overborne with shields and ceased. Then he was asked who he was, but he was silent and did not answer. Then King Ella spoke. "This man may thus come to a greater trial if he will not tell us who he is. Now he shall be cast into a snake pit, and let him sit there for a very long while. But if he says anything by which we might know he is Ragnar, then he shall be taken out as quickly as possible." Then he was led from there, and he sat in the pit a very long while. But no snakes fastened onto him. Then the men said, "This man is very strong. He was not bitten by a weapon all day, and now no snakes harm him." Then King Ella said that he was to be stripped of the outermost clothing he had on. Thus it was done, and all the snakes hung on him on all sides. Then Ragnar said, "The young pigs would now squeal if they knew what the older ones suffered." And though he spoke thus, they did not know for certain that it was Ragnar who was held rather than another king. Then he spoke a verse. "I have had 51 battles, which were thought glorious. I made much harm. I did not look to a snake to be my bane. Things happen very often to one that one thinks of the least. The young pigs would squeal if they knew the state of the boar, of the injury done to me, Snakes dig in my flesh, stab at me harshly, and have sucked on me. Soon now will my body die among the beasts. Thank you very much for watching this video. As always, I would love to hear your feedback on it and which subject you would love to see covered next. For now though, we've only gotten halfway through the saga of Ragnar Lodbrok. Join us next time as we follow Ragnar's sons in their quest for vengeance. See you next time.